Alex Cora did not hinder the Boston Red Sox in 2024. He actually was one of the biggest reasons why they were in the playoff conversation all the way up until the end of the season.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part is it is completely free. So you might as well tune in because Locked On is your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. No, I am not making up those numbers, and I'm going to tell you all about that a little bit later on today's show. Happy Friday. We have made it through another week with the holidays coming up, and those Christmas commercials started on TV the day after Halloween. I swear it gets earlier every single year, but I love the Christmas season. It honestly is my favorite time of the year. My decorations have not gone up yet, but they will be soon, and Thanksgiving is right around the corner here. And with the holidays coming up, also marks a big time in the offseason for baseball teams because teams are starting to finalize deals with players and work out free agent contracts, and the Red Sox did make a move for a pitcher that they are now bringing into the staff, and I'll be talking about him a little bit later. But first, there were lots of talks surrounding Alex Cora during the Red Sox 2024 season, whether he was the problem for Boston, whether the reason that the Red Sox weren't performing to their best potential was because of Cora, and if he was part of the problem. So I am going to be giving you my letter grade on Alex Cora from a managerial perspective and how he performed in his managerial role during the season, what he could have done better, what he did really well, and what we expect from him going into next season. But first, speaking of Alex Cora, he did complete the Boston half marathon on November 10th, which is very exciting. He averaged 9 minutes and 25 seconds per mile for his pace in the 13.1 miles. So he ended up finishing in a time of 2 hours, 3 minutes and 23 seconds. It was actually not a bad performance for a guy who you wouldn't typically think would be in shape because during his typical workday on the baseball field, he's sitting in the dugout watching the game. So good for him for getting that half marathon in, and especially because he won't be able to run the Boston Marathon because, well, it's during the season, it's on Patriots Day, and the Red Sox always have a home game that day. So he was able to run the half marathon instead and represent, which good for him. And also Pete Fatse, the hitting coach, ran the race as well in 1:51:48, averaging 8:32 per mile. So he was a little bit faster than Cora, but always nice seeing Red Sox personnel involved in the community and doing things that other people from the public in the Boston area are doing. And I really like that about Alex Cora, that he's a people person and he doesn't mind going out into the community and interacting with people. And I think running this race further exemplifies that about him and his personality. And that is one of the biggest reasons about the 2024 season for why I don't blame Alex Cora as much for the Red Sox struggles. I think in regards to a player standpoint, he does a really good job of connecting with the players, and he's able to have that sense of being able to personalize the experience for each of them. And I've heard this from multiple people, people I've talked to around the Red Sox organization who have said that Alex Cora is a great manager because of the fact that he connects individually with each player. And that really connects back to his ability to go out into the community and connect with people and talk to people. And when you have a team like the Boston Red Sox, where they really desperately wanted to win, Alex Cora was by their sides every single day, and he's the guy who's in the locker room with them all the time and knows whether players are good to play that day, whether they need to rest again if they have an injury. And injuries were really prevalent to the Red Sox season in 2024. Lots of guys missing lots of time due to being hurt. And that alone makes it hard for any manager to overcome when it comes to their management decisions, because they then find themselves having to put guys into games that you wouldn't normally see in certain situations. And the primary example of that is with the pitching. You had a lot of guys in the bullpen having to be overused because there were guys that were sidelined with injuries, like Chris Martin missing a good amount of time, Justin Slayton, who was one of their best relievers, missing time. And you would associate Justin Slayton with pitching in high leverage, but when he wasn't available because he was hurt, Alex Cora had to put somebody else into a high leverage situation that you wouldn't normally see there. And that makes it challenging for any manager to navigate. And from the standpoint of having to navigate those situations, Alex Cora did a heck of a job with that and being able to manage those injuries and putting people in spots that you typically wouldn't see them in, but sometimes they would surprise us and perform better in those situations than we thought. And also, even when it came to leaving guys in versus taking them out, he would trust his pitchers a lot of the times. Like, there were a couple times when Tanner Houck wanted to stay in the game and Alex Cora would go out to the mound but decide to keep him in, and it ended up working out because he was able to pitch deeper into the game. And when you have a starting rotation that doesn't get through a lot of innings as a whole, that also puts pressure on the bullpen to have to pitch more and have guys from the bullpen ready earlier on in the game. So that's a difficult job for Alex Cora to have to manage. So you have to think about the roster that he had in front of him. He's not going to turn everybody into God. He's not the one out there making the plays defensively, because the Red Sox infield defense in particular was very bad without Trevor Story in 2024. Until he came back in that last month of the season, they really struggled defensively in the infield. And Alex Cora is not out there on the field making those plays and fielding baseballs. So you have to understand that, yes, Trevor Story makes the infield significantly better with his glove. That's the biggest reason why the Red Sox brought him here. But when he's injured, what is Alex Cora supposed to do? The Red Sox front office is making the decisions on who gets called up from AAA, if they trade for somebody or they bring in somebody. That's not an Alex Cora decision. He is just the manager in games. So he has to work with what he has to work with. And the roster itself going into the 2024 season was not great. And there were a lot of people going into the season that expected the team to have a similar season and record as they had the year before, when they finished with 78 wins and were last in their division. The Red Sox finished at 500, exactly on the dot, at 81 and 81 in 2024, which obviously that's not fantastic, but it is a little bit better than they finished the season before, and they still had a good amount of injuries. Don't you think that Alex Cora deserves some credit for that he was able to keep this team afloat and treading water and being in the playoff conversation for a lot of the season? Really, up until the last couple weeks is when people were starting to realize that the Red Sox really don't have much of a chance of making the playoffs. But for the longest time, the Red Sox were in that wild card race. And Alex Cora is a big reason why, because he knows who to play when. And yes, there were certain scenarios where he would put in a pitcher that probably wasn't best to put in that situation. So that's why I have to take some points off of his final letter grade, because he's not perfect. No manager is perfect. But if you consider everything and the task that was at hand for Alex Cora this season, and the fact that the team finished at 500 and not under that, with the roster that they had, when you had Jarren Duran and Rafael Devers, and then Tyler O'Neill, who provided power in the lineup, but not really anybody else who could hit as consistently as those guys, that's a heck of a management job for somebody to keep that team in the playoff conversation and keeping those vibes high and keeping the guys wanting to win. So I am giving Alex Cora an overall letter grade of a B+ for the season because of his managing. I think if you look at the season as a whole, you can point to more things he did right than more things he did wrong. And even when it comes to challenging plays, the Red Sox were 67.9% successful in overturning calls via replay in 2024, which was the best team in the league. And that goes to show that the Red Sox and Alex Cora wouldn't settle if there was a play that they really felt like the ump got wrong. They would challenge it. And I remember a specific play at home plate where the Red Sox had a runner that was sliding into home plate and he was ruled out. And then the Red Sox decided to challenge it and they overturned it and he was safe and the run scored and the entire dugout went nuts. And Alex Cora was beaming ear to ear and there was just really solid vibes in that dugout at that time, and you could see how excited and happy everybody was. And that to me is the epitome of what Alex Cora does, just makes his team engaged and wanting to win. And there's only so much you can do with the roster that you are given, and I think Alex Cora did the best he could with what he was given. And I think the personality part of being able to connect with the players on a deeper level is way more important than people talk about or give a manager credit for. And you do have to remember also that the manager is with this team all the time. We don't know behind the scenes what goes on. What if there's a pitcher that was supposed to be available that day and then he goes to warm up to come out of the bullpen and he's feeling some pain, so they decide not to put him in and they put somebody else in instead. There's lots of little moves that happen behind the scenes that we don't see as fans, and that's definitely something that should be kept in mind when you're thinking about how you're going to evaluate the team and the season and the manager. So overall, I like Alex Cora as a manager, and I think the Red Sox are really lucky to have him. And I give him a B+ because, yes, there were certain logistical decisions that he made that were questionable when it came to keeping a reliever in a game for an extra inning when he should have pulled him because he didn't really have it and he struggled to finish an inning, or whether he pulled somebody too quickly when they were rolling and cruising through the opposing lineup and then he brings in somebody else and that pitcher blows the game. Those types of situations happened a little bit more than I would have liked to see, and I found myself questioning a little bit why he made those types of moves that he did, but not enough to the point where I would knock down his letter grade significantly. I still really like Alex Cora as a manager, and I think the Red Sox are very lucky to have him. And I think the next few years with him being in an extended role with them and sticking around as a manager is going to help the Red Sox to see good results. And hopefully the front office does its part in helping the team to see good results. And part of that front office is Craig Breslow. So coming up, I'm going to be talking about him and giving him a letter grade for his first season in his position with the Red Sox. The World Series, Super Bowl, the Olympics. The world's top athletes get to play in these top level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. Select Quote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. It is so incredibly important to have strategies to win in both sports and life. And that leading strategy for life is having the best life insurance on your bench with Select Quote to protect your legacy and your family's future. This is a good time to get on Select Quote, especially because a lot of companies have their open enrollment period for benefits for next year. And I was just looking into this at my company because I have to renew my benefits for 2025, but I now am married, so my status is going to change. So the life insurance beneficiary, I'm adding my husband to, and basically going through the life insurance plan, see if I want to change anything. It's so important to make sure that you're all set up for the future in that regard, because you really never know what's going to happen when. Select Quote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience. helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedon. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. Don't wait any longer. Life insurance is so important, and you'll feel so much better in terms of your peace of mind if you have a good life insurance plan. So make sure that you don't waste another day to check that out and take advantage. In talking about Alex Cora and the season that he had as manager for the Boston Red Sox, it's important to also look at the roster he was given. And the roster he was given was not a fantastic one, especially from a pitching standpoint. We knew going into the season that there were going to be lots of question marks surrounding this pitching staff, whether guys were going to pan out, whether guys were going to be able to eat innings, and what that was going to look like. And then you had starters Nick Pivetta and Cutter Crawford, who had problems with the home run ball. You had Brian Bayo, who struggled for the entire first half of the season. You had Tanner Houck, who actually elevated his game by pitching more innings than he's used to pitching. And then you had Lucas Giolito, who couldn't even pitch all season. So there were so many circumstances with this Red Sox team that went on with the starting rotation. Didn't really have a defined fifth starter. That role went to Cooper Criswell, but then they moved him back into the pen and then brought him back up. So there were lots of different things that went on with this Red Sox team that were question marks in terms of the pitching staff. And that's hard to work with if you're any manager. And that leads me to talking about Craig Breslow, who was in his first season as the president of baseball operations for the Red Sox, in charge of executing deals with players and agents and making trades that make sense for the Red Sox and making sure he gets a good return on guys that he ships out of Boston. And it's hard when it's your first year in that role because lots of people are formulating thoughts about you based on your past experience and the resume that you have and forming judgments based on that before you even get a chance to step foot in the position. So I will say when they hired Breslow, he was hired into a tough spot because it was a time of Red Sox baseball where they were struggling. They had just gotten rid of Chaim Bloom and didn't feel like he was part of the future in terms of building a competitive team. Again, the Red Sox weren't really acting like they were invested in the major league team from an ownership standpoint. So then you bring in Craig Breslow and you're hoping for him to change the tide a little bit and make moves that were big to make the Red Sox better in 2024. But then he comes in, and I talked about this a little bit on yesterday's show, just some of the newbies that came to the team in 2024 and kind of breaking down some of the guys who stood out that came into the roster. And he didn't exactly hit on all of those moves. For example, one move he definitely did hit on was bringing in Tyler O'Neill, who just made a huge impact offensively with the power he brought to the lineup and also his versatility in being a right-handed bat and being able to hit well against left-handed pitching because the Red Sox rotation and overall roster did not have a lot of people with that same ability. So when you looked at the Red Sox lineup and you saw players like Rafael Devers, Wilyer Abreu, Jarren Duran in there, as great of hitters as those guys were, they couldn't be relied on to consistently hit well against lefties. So that's something that Tyler O'Neill brought. And I don't think anybody can argue that Tyler O'Neill didn't make a positive impact on the Boston Red Sox. So that certainly was a move that I liked. The Alex Verdugo trade is still pending. I mean, in a way, we can say right now the Red Sox already won the trade because Alex Verdugo went to the Yankees and didn't perform exactly to the level that they wanted him to perform at in New York. And the Red Sox got 3 pitchers in return, but we don't know what Nicholas Judas is yet. Greg Weissert struggled in the Red Sox bullpen and didn't impress as much as Breslow and the Red Sox wanted him to. But Richard Fitz, who made a few starts for Boston at the end of the season, did impress and was able to make a statement and be one of those guys that the Red Sox could be excited about. So that was nice to see that he was in the mix and was showing some level of dominance in those few starts that he made when he got called up to the major league team. But it's still early on in that process for these pitchers and their development to know what they're going to turn into. So we can't really evaluate that one yet. But the trade deadline is really what did it for me and brought down Craig Breslow's letter grade for me, because not one player that he acquired at the trade deadline was effective when they came to Boston. And, one of them was a minor league trade, which he brought in a minor league pitcher. So we can't really evaluate that one again still, because we don't know what he's going to turn into. But when you think about the other moves that he made, like bringing in James Paxton, obviously that was an unfortunate situation because he got injured during his first start with the team. Can't really help that. Not Breslow's fault. But then he brings in Danny Jansen, who was supposed to be a right-handed bat that provided a lot of productivity, and he just wasn't able to do that. So that was disappointing. And yes, from a defensive standpoint, he was a good catcher and miles better defensively than Connor Wong, but he didn't bring the bat that the Red Sox were hoping to get when they traded for him. So that was disappointing for sure. Then he brings in Lucas Sims and Luis Garcia, both pitchers that did not perform up to expectations. Garcia especially just completely fell apart when he came to Boston. And I don't really know why, because he was pitching well when he was with the Angels earlier in the season. And I get that transition midway through the year at the trade deadline can be tough for a player to make when they're going over to a different team halfway through. So that's fair for him to struggle to make that adjustment, in Boston being a completely different type of environment. But that excuse can only go so far. I mean, he made a good amount of appearances when he first came to Boston before he went on the IL. And obviously, Breslow thought that the version of Garcia that we were getting was the one that we saw when he was with the Angels, and that clearly didn't happen. So that was another disappointment. And it's hard that that was a poor judgment by Breslow, that he was going to be a guy who was supposed to help fix this bullpen and keep the Red Sox within striking distance of a playoff spot, because he honestly hindered to the bullpen and made it a little bit worse. Then you had Lucas Sims, who was just off and on, and he was really good with the Reds and was able to get lots of guys out with them. And I was talking to our Locked On Reds host about it, actually, and he was saying, you're getting a good one in Sims. So I was excited about him, but the inconsistency that he showed when he came to Boston was also something that was tough to watch and frustrating as a fan, because we thought he was going to be this big bullpen piece that was going to help fix the Red Sox bullpen struggles, and that just didn't happen. I mean, he had a couple outings where he was lights out and took care of business, and you saw that version of Sims that we saw when he was in Cincinnati, but then he goes and struggles the next outing, and we sit here saying, well, what is this pitcher? Like, what version of him should we be expecting to get? So that was just very frustrating as a fan to witness. And then he got injured as well. So another acquisition at the trade deadline that just didn't work out. So overall, the Red Sox trade deadline was very disappointing. Did not go out and go as hard as they could have gone at the deadline to get this team where they needed to be. And it was kind of a repeat of the season before, with a little bit more emphasis on saying they wanted to make the team better, because at the 2023 trade deadline, they never really made it clear what direction they were going in at the trade deadline, whether they were going to be buyers or sellers. And then they were a game and a half or so out of a wild card spot at that point. And they didn't really do either. I mean, they added a piece, but he wasn't a super impactful piece. So they weren't really buyers, and they didn't really go heavy. The issue with Breslow was that he tried to go heavy and tried to make moves to make this Red Sox team better. And he ended up not being able to deliver on that, because the moves that he did make just didn't pan out. So now it makes you wonder, what is Breslow's ability to identify good talent? Does he have the capability of saying these are the types of players that are going to do well in Boston and help make us a better team? Because now he's in the hot seat because of that, and he's in the hot seat about this offseason and the moves he's going to make, and he needs to get guys who will be bona fide good players in Boston that will help elevate the roster. So when you take all of that into consideration, and the fact that he hasn't done a whole lot that has shown that he has the capability to make the right moves, for right now, I have to give him a D+ for his grade, because I know that sounds harsh, but if you think about everything in his first year that he did, what did he do that made this Red Sox team better in 2024? Not a whole lot. And I think that letter grade has a strong capability to go up quickly depending on how this offseason goes. I think it's very possible that I see me change my letter grade halfway through the season once we see who these guys are that he acquires this offseason and how they contribute to this Red Sox team. So there's definitely lots of room for improvement there, especially if he gets the green light from ownership to really spend this offseason, which it sounds like he did. I have faith that Breslow can turn it around. I hope some of it was just those first year blues of having to adjust to being in his first season in that position. He knows the game for sure. I just hope he can apply that to his front office role. And I think we still have yet to see that. So I'm sticking with that letter grade for now, but I think there's definitely room for improvement there. And coming up, speaking of Craig Breslow, he did make a move to add to the Red Sox pitching staff. So coming up, I'm going to be telling you all about this pitcher and what kind of role we'll likely see him in Boston. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. FanDuel is a great way to make lots of money quickly betting on tons of different sports. So if you want that to be you, make sure that you head to FanDuel today and check it out. It is that time of year where the Boston Red Sox and other teams across Major League Baseball are starting to make moves to improve their roster. And the Red Sox did just that by adding a pitcher, signing a major league contract with relief pitcher Justin Wilson. So this is the Red Sox first on-field edition of the offseason. Wilson is 37 years old, and he's been around for quite a while, spending some time with the Pirates, Yankees, Tigers, Cubs, Mets, and Reds across the last decade. He was out of baseball in 2023, getting Tommy John surgery, but he returned to make 60 appearances with the Reds last season, compiling a .559 ERA while sitting in the 95th percentile of chase rate. It is a big league deal with Justin Wilson that is for 1 year, $2.250 million with $750K in performance bonuses based on numbers of games. The bonus is 5 levels and it maxes out at 60 games, which would essentially make it a $3 million deal if he pitches in at least 60 games, and he pitched in 60 last season. So it's really similar relatively to the deal he signed last year. But the concern with him, obviously, is what is he going to look like in 2025? What version of him are we going to get? Because he came back from Tommy John surgery and struggled to put up competitive numbers in Cincinnati. And it's hard to know when a pitcher goes through something like that, what they're going to look like when they come back. So for him, I'm curious to see, is he able to effectively pitch in Boston when he comes here? He is a lefty, which is good from a versatility standpoint for the Red Sox because they don't really have many left-handed relievers. So they could certainly use that for sure. But the good thing about this is it's kind of a low risk, high reward type of situation because he's likely going to compete with a number of other left-handed options throughout spring training for a role in the Red Sox bullpen at some point in the year. So it's not like this is a definite, like he's going to be the main lefty that comes out of the pen. I don't think the Red Sox necessarily would be ready to make that conclusion right now. I think they would want to see how he performs in spring training first and say, okay, this is what he looks like. So this is what we have to work with here if we want to give him the opportunity, or if somebody else looks better, then they get the spot. But it's important to know that he has had other seasons across Major League Baseball in which he found success. And I think the root of his game is there, and he definitely has some of the fundamentals and just general stuff in his arsenal to be able to succeed. I just don't know if the version we saw of him in those 60 games in 2024 indicate that that's just him as a pitcher now, and that because he had been removed from the game for so long because of Tommy John surgery and having to recover, if he's going to be able to get back to those competitive numbers again. So again, it's a question mark, but it's a pretty minor signing. And I'm not using this signing as an indication of the Red Sox mentality for the rest of the offseason, because I've already seen people making comments about this and saying, wow, here we go again with the full throttle. This is the big offseason move the Red Sox are making. That's definitely not the case. With the higher marquee guys, the guys who are really well desired by a lot of teams, they are the ones that take longer to sign. Look how long it took Ohtani to sign last year when he finally agreed to go to the Dodgers. And same with Yamamoto. They both signed pretty late in the process. So it's important to remember that those guys are going to take a while with their decision. And I don't think it's any indication of the Red Sox or their behavior or what they're planning to do and how they plan to approach the rest of this offseason. I think this is just a move they made where they said, okay, let's just sign him for a year, see what happens during spring training. And if he's looking good, we can bring him into the bullpen as a left-handed relief depth option. I wouldn't read any more into it than that. I don't think it'll be the only bullpen move they make. At least it can't be, because they need a lot more work with that bullpen still before they can call it a day. But I do think the positive side of it is that he could provide some depth if he's able to come back and perform at a competitive level for Boston. So it can't really hurt. I'm not saying it's the best relief pitcher they could have gotten, but they're not spending a crazy amount of money on him. And if he performs, fantastic. If not, whatever, 1-year deal, part ways after that. So we'll have to see what happens with that, as well as other moves that the Red Sox do make throughout the course of this offseason. This is a huge offseason for the Boston Red Sox. They're really going to be tested, and they're going to have to show that they can answer the call and respond to those tests and go all out to get the players needed to make them a competitive baseball team once again. And Craig Breslow has a big opportunity to start to have fans feel more confident in him and his abilities if he goes about the rest of this offseason the right way and punches the right buttons. So, like I always say, keep the faith. And I do appreciate you tuning in to Locked On Red Sox. Make sure you check out Locked On MLB next with host Paul Sullivan, aka Sully, who will keep you up to date with all things going on across the league with other teams and the moves they make. So if you want to hear all about that, you can catch Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. As always, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.